In some states they have, in Delaware they have. Northern Virginia, many, many other states, all of the states, they have not been named. They're still living in our midst. Have they been defrocked?
But this is interesting.
Are they living in neighborhoods?
But this is, let me just interrupt you here, because in the studio here I've got two people gently nodding. I mean, the reaction to that, that little brief press conference the Pope gave on his plane has been on the whole positive in the British media, but do you think he actually does need to go further?
Well, I think there's two sides, two parts here. One is what he was saying. The first thing we have to do is to help the victims. We don't know what he's going to do on this visit because it's always kept very secret, but on other visits he has met people who've been abused. And when you hear, for example, one person he met in Malta saying that when he saw the Pope cry with him and pray with him over this, he felt that he'd started the healing process again. It was something that started to help him. So that's one thing. How do we help the victims of what we have to say is appalling abuse? The other thing is, how do we make sure it never happens again? And there, the UK is a good example, because 10 years ago the Church put in place very, very strict safeguarding rules. And now, in fact, the government asks other public bodies to look at the Catholic Church to see what we're doing and to imitate this, to make sure that this abuse doesn't happen elsewhere in society.
But it's interesting, time and again we talk about these issues on World Have Your Say, whether on BBC Radio or BBC Television, and time and again Catholics come on and say what you're saying, that you want more detail from the Pope on how this problem's going to be tackled worldwide. Why is it that he's not acting on the frustrations, not of non-Catholics, but of many Catholics themselves?
I think the word that's being used an awful lot these days, Bishop Nichols used the other day, is the complexity of all these problems. I think part of it is that everything has to go back to Rome. There have been these very time lapses between letters going from bishops to Rome. So I think that from now on, to move on, we need this subsidiarity where we can run our own churches in our own country, deal with these things on site and move more quickly. Then we can reach out and people will feel they're having a redress.
And let me remind those of you... Sorry to interrupt you, Tom.
But I think the very reason why it was actually the Pope, when he was Joseph Ratzinger, asked for everything to be referred to Rome, is that local bishops weren't dealing with it, and this is the problem that's happened. So that's why he asked to see everything to make it happen. My point was that in England this was done 10 years ago. The UK is a success story that should be imitated across the world.
And those of you watching here on BBC World News, I should remind you that we're going to have full coverage of the Pope's speech in Westminster in the next couple of hours' time. Let's pull up an email from Mesfin in Somerset in the southwest of England, who writes, I'm an Ethiopian who is proud of being an African. I'm so angry and disappointed by the Cardinal's comments on Britain being like the Third World. The Third World is rich in its beliefs and culture. He is naive and narrow-minded. Tom, in Sao Paulo, did you agree with that email? Do you think it was the wrong phrase to use to describe the UK as Third World because of its level of secularism?
I'll be honest with you. I live in Brazil. We're regarded as a third world country. We always have been, actually. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to come down here, but there's a lot of progress going on in Brazil nowadays. We're still regarded a third world country, and I think that the term itself is elusive. What was this accessory to the Pope referring to? He was referring to certain particular difficulties.
Well, I suppose, Tom, let me interrupt you here, because I think a lot of people took it as meaning if you are secular, you are underdeveloped.
No, I don't think so. I could not possibly agree with that, because everybody knows that England is very well developed in terms of science and in terms of as a society. The US is a very secular country. I don't think that this cardinal is ignorant at all, and he would not say something like that with that meaning. I think that people take the meaning that they want to take. So if you have a grievance with the church and you find the opportunity to further that grievance, then you would take this comment with that meaning.
Well, Tom, I don't think you can quite see them, but Emily and Chris here are nodding away with you, agreeing with the points that you're making. Let's bring in David, who's on the phone from Ireland. Welcome to the conversation here on BBC World News, David. What's your point?
Hello, my name is David Wild. Yes, I'm an Irish Catholic architect, and I studied in England. So I had plenty of time to get to know English people, And when I saw the Queen and the Pope together, I thought that was good. I'm not here to talk about abuse or anything. I just felt that these two people, who may not particularly like each other, they represent a lot of very nice people, both in all over the world and in England. And to bring two people together, I think is good. There's so easy to criticise and give out about the Pope as a person or the Queen or whatever, but just to see people working together, it has to be positive. We have so much negative in our world, and life is so short. And I was asked earlier about secularism. I do think it's important to have spirituality. When you put your children to bed at night and you don't want them to be lonely, you might say a little prayer or something like that. Or I have children going to college, sometimes they're lonely. And that's the way I would deal with it. And I'm not getting into politics or something, just that one little thing inside you to make you feel a little bit safer. You know, I'm not saying people that are secular or don't have any belief are not safe or something, but for the vast majority, I feel it's better to have a little bit of faith and a little bit of belief.
Okay, so there's two interesting points there. One is you're making the case for faith, but also, and this is a point that hasn't come up in the rest of the programme, you're saying this is a great symbol to the world when you have two heads of churches, the Catholic Church and the Church of England, being seen to get along, being seen to be together. Evelyn in Washington, do you agree that that symbol alone has made this trip worthwhile?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, but my point, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to say that we would like the Pope to come out more strongly with the bishops who have known about the sex abuse crisis and who have passed priests on from one community to another, knowing that they were pedophiles, and come out telling them that we need to be more transparent with the names of these priests.
Okay, and that's the point that you were making previously. Let's stick to this idea of a message that's being sent to the world as well. Richie, you've already expressed your doubts about some elements of this visit, but do you agree that to see two major churches coming together, to be seen to be cooperating, is a good thing?
Well, that is a good thing, and I certainly think that the Pope has every right to come and visit this country. The only thing that the Protest the Pope campaign is taking issue with is the fact that it is a state visit and that the state is funding this visit, when if you look at the kind of speeches that the Pope has been making, there's been a lot of proselytising in them.
Could I ask a question?
I'm afraid you can't, because we're right up to the end of the programme, but maybe we can do that. I know you're coming on BBC World Service Radio later. Richard, did you want to finish that point you were making?
I think I was about done.
OK, well, in which case, thank you very much indeed. That was Richie Thompson from the National Federation of Atheist, Humanist and Secular Student Societies with us live from London. Thanks to Chris and Emily for coming in. And by the way, if you're wondering how Emily came onto the programme along with Liz, you emailed the BBC, and anyone who does that, if they put their name at the bottom along with the phone number, we're happy to get you involved on World Have Your Say. Thanks also to Evelyn Mercantini in Washington, D.C. and Tom in Sao Paulo. I'll speak to you in a couple of hours on BBC World Service Radio, or carry on the conversation now at worldhaveyoursay.com. Goodbye.